In the first set of lessons, we covered the basics of deductive reasoning and the logical properties of sentences, sets of sentences, and arguments. Now we're going to begin working on how to symbolize and assess them in the formal first-order system of sentential logic, which is often also called propositional logic. And it's called sentential logic because the most basic units of the system are entire truth functional sentences symbolized with a capital letter. We call these atomic sentences. P, Q, and R are often the default letters chosen by logicians, but you can use any capital letter. For instance, it is raining can be R, it is wet can be W. One way to do this is just pick a letter from a word in the sentence. That can be really helpful without having to write out a key. So the next element of sentential logic that we're going to focus on in this video are the 5 truth functional connectives. These connectives are used to join atomic sentences into modified compound sentences. The reason they're called truth functional is because each has a set characteristic truth table that tells us what the truth value of the compound sentences are in relation to the values of the component parts. We'll get into how to format truth tables and what those compounds elements are in a later video, just a couple of videos from now. But for now, we're just going to talk about how to paraphrase and symbolize sentences from natural English using these connectives. So in sentential logic, we have 2 types of connectives. Unary connectives are connectives that take only one sentence as its component part, and binary connectives require 2 component sentences. Negation is our only unary connective. It attaches to the front of a sentence and modifies both its meaning and its truth value. The other 4 connectives, conjunction, disjunction, the material conditional, and the material biconditional, all require 2 sentences as components for the new compound sentence. Now we're going to look at these one at a time in detail. So as we've already said, negation is our only unary connective. And the natural English word for this connective is not, and it's usually somewhere in the middle of a sentence. When we do our truth functional paraphrase to symbolize this, we move it from the middle of the sentence to the front and write it as "it is not the case that." This keeps us from accidentally leaving negations buried in atomic sentences when we need to pull them out. So the part that comes after "it is not the case that" is the complete sentence. So a grammatically correct complete sentence that's going to be modified by that negation. It's either going to be an atomic sentence or another compound sentence, but we'll get into how to deal with complex sentences in a later video. So we always symbolize the negation using the tilde that goes out in front. So here's an example. The natural English, "it is not raining," right? We would paraphrase as "it is not the case that it is raining." So we wouldn't symbolize "it is not raining" as an atomic sentence itself. We're going to pull that negation out first. And then we're going to symbolize it as here, tilde R, where R is "it is raining," and that tilde is our symbol for the negation that "it is not the case that." So next we have conjunction, our first binary connective. Conjunction requires 2 components that it connects together, and those component parts are called the conjuncts. The truth functional paraphrase is and, so we're always going to use and we symbolize it with the ampersand. When doing the truth functional paraphrase step, we always make sure that on each side of that and is a complete sentence in itself, right? Something that is truth functional, something that we can turn into an atomic sentence, or itself is a compound sentence if we're talking about complex symbolizations. And is also the most common natural English expression you'll see for a conjunction, but it's not the only way. Any word that connects 2 sentences and indicates that both are true at the same time should be interpreted as a conjunction. And that includes things like but, however, although, and a few others. So see a chart on page 54 of the logic book for some more examples of things that can be symbolized for things that we're going to interpret as an and for the conjunction. So here's an example. Our natural English sentence is cupcake and sugar are both dogs, right? And then when we do our paraphrase, like I said, we want to make sure that we have complete grammatically correct sentences on both sides. So we're going to turn that into sugar is a dog and cupcake is a dog. And then we're going to symbolize that as S ampersand K. So S is sugar is a dog, K is cupcake is a dog, and of course that ampersand is our symbol for the conjunction. This one I think is pretty straightforward and intuitive. So next we have the disjunction. This is the or connective that we symbolize with a lowercase v. There are two natural English connectives that will always be symbolized using the disjunction, and these are or and unless. The fact that unless is paraphrased and symbolized as or is counterintuitive and confuses students every semester. When you get unless on a homework problem or on an exam, students will do all kinds of weird things to try to symbolize it. You just need to make sure to commit it to memory to treat unless as an or. And just like with conjunction, it's important when you do a truth functional paraphrase, you have full sentences on each side of the or. And those component parts of a disjunction are called the disjuncts. So here's an example, cupcake is a dog or a cat. We're going to put that in a paraphrase with complete sentences. Cupcake is a dog or cupcake is a cat. And then to symbolize it, I have D for cupcake is a dog, the V for that disjunction, and then C for cupcake is a cat. Now I want to briefly note here that English disjunctions are used in two different senses, inclusively and exclusively. We often use the exclusive sense of or in natural language. So the example we always use is a parent telling their child that they can have a cookie or ice cream for dessert. If the child says, okay, I'll have both, that's often not what the parent was looking for, right? The parent means they can have one or the other or not both. The disjunction connective in our system is the inclusive sense of or, meaning that the sentence is true if both disjuncts are true. So we have to do more work when we're symbolizing if the sentence means that exclusive sense of or with that but not both added in. Here, when you read an or, unless it actually says but not both, you're always just going to take it as a straightforward inclusive disjunction. So now we have the material conditional, which we paraphrase as if, and then, right? If then. This is the connective that is typically the most confusing for students, as in natural language, we use the word if to mean all kinds of different relationships, and the material conditional doesn't really capture that. In the textbook and in class, we're going to symbolize the material conditional using this horseshoe symbol. But if you're looking at outside sources on logic, you'll probably see the arrow. The arrow is also much easier to type than the horseshoe system on most keyboards and smartphones. So if you prefer to use the arrow, it's absolutely fine as long as you do it consistently. I know an arrow means a material conditional, but try not to go back and forth when writing out problems from the horseshoe to the arrow, because I want to make sure you know what you're doing. The component sentence that comes after the if in a paraphrase is called the antecedent, and it goes before the horseshoe when you symbolize it. The part that comes after the then is the consequent, and that's what goes after the symbol when you're symbolizing it. So part of the other reason that this is confusing for students is that there's a wide range of natural English expressions that you'll have to learn, and you'll have to learn which ones go which way. So here's for each of these examples, whatever is in the P spot is the antecedent and should go first when you paraphrase and symbolize. The Q sentence will be your consequent. Provided that and given are just different ways to say if. Other things would say assuming, right? So assuming P, Q is also going to be this type of thing that it means if. Now notice for these last three, the Q sentence, which will be your consequent, comes first in the natural English expression. This means that you'll have to change the order of the component parts in the sentence to preserve the meaning when you do the paraphrase and symbolization. So all of these are going to be symbolized P, horseshoe, Q. With this bolded exception of the only if, the best way to remember how to symbolize material conditionals is that whatever comes after the if expression, whether it says if, provided that, given, or assuming, is usually the antecedent no matter where it appears in the natural English expression. Only if, as I just mentioned, is the big exception to this rule. If you see something P, only if Q, you're not going to change the order there at all. Whatever is first is your antecedent, and then what comes after the only if is the consequent. And really, you just need to memorize that when you see the word only there and only if, whatever comes after it is the antecedent. So I know the first pass through, especially done very quickly in this video, is a lot of information and can be confusing. So let's look at a few examples. So natural English, given that Cupcake is a dog, she is a mammal. Given we take to mean if, and it comes right here at the front. So we know that Cupcake is a dog is going to be our antecedent, and we're going to paraphrase it like this. If Cupcake is a dog, then Cupcake is a mammal. And then we're going to symbolize that. I just picked letters from the sentences, obviously not K because that's in both. So D, horseshoe, M for D, Cupcake is a dog, M for Cupcake is a mammal. Next, we have the ground is wet if it's raining. So here we have the if, and it doesn't say only if, we just have the if. So we know that what comes after it, what comes directly after the if, is going to be our antecedent. So when we do that paraphrase, we're going to shift around the order of that sentence and say, if it's raining, then the ground is wet. And then we're going to symbolize that as R horseshoe W, R for it is raining, W for the ground is wet. Just a couple of more. Natural English, you can pass this class provided that you study. Provided that, remember, is just one of the many ways we say if. So that is going to be our antecedent. So we need to move it around in our paraphrase. If you study, then you can pass this class. And then our symbolization is going to be S horseshoe P, S for if for you actually do study, and P for being passing this class. And here we have that only if, right? I will take the promotion only if I get a raise. When we have that only expression, we know that what comes first is the antecedent and what comes next is the consequent. So now we know we have if I take the promotion, then I will get a raise. And that's going to be symbolized as P for I take the promotion, horseshoe R for I will get a raise. So that's the material conditional, and I know that there's a lot of different things going on there, so rewatch this or ask questions, or as always, look at the textbook or the course manual for more information. So the last connective in sentential logic is the material biconditional, which is paraphrased as if and only if. You can symbolize it using either the triple bar, which is what you'll see in the textbook and in this class, or the double-headed arrow. This one's much easier than the regular material conditional. It only has two natural English connectives, if and only if, so the same one that we use in our paraphrase, or just in case. So if you see a sentence that says P just in case Q, you know that's going to be your biconditional. And then here's an example. Jane is married to Anne just in case Anne is married to Jane, because that's how marriage works. Our truth functional paraphrase is going to be Jane is married to Anne if and only if Anne is married to Jane. And then we're going to symbolize it as J triple bar A, where J is Jane is married to Anne and A is Anne is married to Jane. So there's just one more thing that you need to watch out for when beginning symbolizations in sentential logic, and that's for when you see connective expressions in natural English that can't be put into a truth functional paraphrase and maintain their meaning. So here are some examples. Bill and Ted are brothers. It has the and, so we might look to paraphrase this as a conjunction, but if we try to break it apart to paraphrase it, we would get Bill is a brother and Ted is a brother, right? Which loses the meaning of the sentence. They're brothers with each other. So we'd have to symbolize this as a single atomic sentence. We can't break this apart at all. So the same is true for 1 and 2 make 3, right? The sentence is talking about adding 1 and 2 together to get 3. There's no way we can break this apart into a sentence about 1 and conjoin it with a sentence about 2 and preserve the meaning. And then this last example is a bit different. So we could paraphrase this sentence as Jane thinks that Mark stole her lunch, or Jane thinks that Larry stole her lunch. But that doesn't capture the meaning of this sentence, right? Jane doesn't think that Mark stole her lunch, and Jane doesn't think that Larry stole her lunch. She thinks that one or the other did, and she doesn't know which one. So that disjunction is in the content of her belief, right? So we can't break that apart as a truth functional connective. So for this type of case as well, we need to symbolize it as a single atomic sentence. And you'll see other examples like this later on. So this wraps up this introductory lesson on symbolization. If anything here was confusing to you, check out the logic book and the course manual for more explanation. There's a chart on page 54 of the logic book that includes all of the information about the connective, their paraphrases, and the symbolizations included in this lecture, and actually some more examples, and is incredibly useful when you start studying and when you start working on problems. And then I also highly recommend you take a look at these practice problems in the textbook. You can check your answers in the solutions documents. And in the next lesson, we're going to get into how to do more complex symbolization building up from these basic compound sentences.